much for joining us in one more episode of your podcast, Save It, Spend It, Share It. And we are happy that you're joining us. If you're joining us for the first time, make sure that you follow this podcast so you can get notifications whenever a new episode is out. We always air the episodes the third week in the month. So the third Thursday of the month, you're going to have that release and you'll be able to be notified if you're following. So I invite you to go ahead and subscribe or follow this podcast. And here I am today with a very special guest. Tell us, what is your name and what do you do?
My name is Mark Witas, and I'm the Director of Mission and Spiritual Care over at Adventist Health Glendale, across the street.
Oh, wow. So You're our neighbor.
I'm your neighbor. That's right. And I also am the senior pastor, part-time senior pastor at Eagle Rock Seventh-day Adventist Church, just around the corner.
Well, thank you. You must deal with the spiritual needs and counseling and giving support for a lot of families. So thank you very much for your ministry.
Thanks. I really enjoy my work.
So, as your daily work, you have to go through very sensitive conversations, conversations that sometimes we're not prepared to have. Mm-hmm. So let me ask you, why is it so hard to talk about death?
About death?
Yes.
Well, let's just start off real cheery this morning.
All right.
Why is it hard to talk about death? From a hospital experience, we have folks that come into the hospital, families gathered around them, and all of a sudden they realize death is going to happen. And they don't want to talk about it because they're not prepared to talk about it. They haven't thought about it for themselves. They haven't thought about it for their loved ones. Sometimes when grandma or grandpa is 92 years old, you're a little more ready. But when somebody's my age, early 30s, and they end up in hospital and things turn for the worst, we're just not prepared. We haven't thought about it. We don't talk about it. We love life, and we love to talk about our plans for the future. To think that those plans for the future are going to come to an end can be really, really daunting to us for a variety of reasons. So we don't like to talk about our own death, and we also don't like to talk about the death of our loved ones because that means there's going to be an end to something that hopefully we really, really enjoy. So there's some spiritual connections with that for some people, and I deal with those in the hospital all the time and in church. And then there's just cultural ones and sociological ones. We don't want to think about the end.
Yeah.
We can't really think about our beginning because we can't remember that far back. But thinking to our end, it's daunting because wait a minute, you mean I'm not going to be here anymore?
Yeah. Yeah. And you mentioned something very interesting, that sometimes it's influenced also by our culture, our upbringing. So can you expand a little bit about that?
Yeah. For me specifically, my experiences have to do with the culture of religion. A lot of the times, if it's the person on the deathbed, they don't want to talk about death because they don't feel prepared to die. And that's unfortunate. Because I think there's one thing we all know. We all know we're going to.
That's right.
I mean,
that's right.
You know you're going to die. I know I'm going to die. I'm a lot older than you, so I'm probably going to get there before you. But we don't like to talk about it because spiritually speaking, sometimes people feel like maybe they're not right with God. And even people who are right with God maybe feel like they didn't do enough to get whatever's after death, right? Whatever they believe is after death. And in the hospital, I get people from all different kinds of persuasions and beliefs and everything. They just don't feel like they've done enough or they're right with God. I've sat with people that have wept and said, I just don't think I've done enough to get into heaven, right? And these are Adventist people, some of them. And I'll say, well, what makes you say that? I thought you were a faithful church attender. I thought you were somebody who loves Jesus, but I just don't know. I just don't know. And so it becomes my job as a pastor, not so much as a chaplain, but as a pastor, it becomes my job to open up the Bible and say, hey, look, the criteria for getting into heaven is if you want to be there with Jesus, he really wants you there. And that sometimes gives people rest to be able to just and give up the struggle and go ahead and breathe their last. But yeah, it's difficult because, again, it's also the unknown.
Yeah.
What's on the other side of that curtain?
What will happen after?
Yeah, right. And we have what we believe, but none of us have been there.
And come back.
And come back, right.
Correct.
So there's some sort of uncertainty there, and sometimes fear. I'm a proponent of talking about it ahead of time, of thinking about it ahead of time, of reading about it ahead of time, so that when you get there, you can die in peace and happiness, and you can die well.
Mm-hmm. So kind of, intellectually preparing yourself of, what happens, what's the process, what will it look like? Because we don't have enough information, we are unprepared. And I went through the death of my dad 2-3 years ago.
I'm sorry.
And, a lot of things were already planned. The funeral was already planned, and a lot of things had been taken care of ahead of time. But he had not made a decision either if he wanted to be buried or cremated.
Oh. And so now the family has to fight over that.
Now the family, it was a conversation within the family, but I realized at that time how difficult those conversations could be. Of having to make a decision, well, I think he would have liked this. So, how can we prepare as an act of love? Right. So our family can follow instructions instead of having to make decisions on their own and feel guilty about it.
Yeah, some of the worst situations that I run into in hospital with families is when their loved one is passing away or has passed away, the discussion that happens in the room because nobody's prepared.
Yeah.
So the first thing, you say an act of love. This is a tremendous act of love. People might think it's morbid, but it's not. It's an act of love for every person that's listening to this to get yourself an advance directive. An advance directive is a plan that is just, you make all the decisions for yourself. You have it written down. It's a legal document, and your family is instructed to do those things. There's no guesswork. Do I want to be cremated? Do I want to be buried? Do I want to be dumped into the Pacific Ocean? Whatever's legal. But your wishes will be carried out. And that's just so important for a family to not have to think and struggle over those things. And you said the funeral was prepared. Yeah. Boy, if you want to be buried, that costs a lot of money.
It does.
So buy an insurance plan that covers that, or invest in a plan that'll cover that, so that your loved ones don't have to suffer financially for it. And on top of an advance directive, and the other part of an advance directive, do you have a DNR? Do not resuscitate if something happens to me. Do you have what happens if I'm just laying there alive but brain dead? What are my instructions for that? An advance directive helps doctors, nurses, and family make the right decision for you. And it's good that not only you have an advance directive, but that you discuss it with your family. Hey, I have this advance directive. These are my wishes. It's all legal. It's been notarized, and here's where I'm keeping it. The hospital and my doctor's office have copies of it, and it's important that you give those to the hospital and to a doctor's office too.
And this becomes a legal document.
It's a legal document. That's right. If you have an advance directive, I know that when you're admitted into our hospital, we always ask, do you have an advance directive? Because we need to know, right? We have Jehovah's Witnesses families that come in that don't believe in blood transfusions. Boy, they always have an advance directive. Do not give me a blood transfusion, right? And if they don't tell us, we don't know.
Yeah, and that's great because they're prepared to follow according to their beliefs.
That's correct. And again, it's an act of love for the family. The family can just open up the notebook and say, here's our instructions. This is what we're supposed to do. And that's in the event of you you're not maybe even dead yet in the hospital, but there's some big decisions. Do we operate or not operate? Do we do this procedure or not do this procedure? And it'll be according to your wishes and according to your will. The other half of that is, if you don't have a will or a trust, then you're putting your family in a horribly precarious situation. to think ahead. What happens after I die? How am I going to take care of my family? If you don't have something prepared and you have 4 children and the children don't know what your wishes are, and you've got a bank account and a retirement account and some property, things like that, to avoid all the squabbling, all of the hard feelings, to have a will or a trust would be just, a huge act of love.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And now that we're getting into having conversations and how to approach, what would be a healthy conversation to have as a family, either with your spouse, your children, with your parents? How would be a way of approaching that conversation?
Yeah, so I'm a big believer in reverently and maybe with some humor, talking about end-of-life things on the regular. I have one son, and he's my favorite son. And from when he was little, I think he understands the nature of life and death, that we all have a time here on earth and then our time is done. And so I talk to him a lot about how to live while you're on earth, right? Our goal and our calling as people who believe is to make this world a more beautiful place, and to while we're doing that, point people to the Creator. Hey, I love Jesus, and He has tasked me to bring heaven to earth as much as I can until I die. So this is what we talk about while we're here on earth. And then I'm going to breathe my last breath, right? That's going to happen, and I want to do it with dignity. I want to, and he had his grandfather living with us for a long time, and we all 3 talked about it a lot. My dad, he lived way past his expiration date, but when he finally died, he died at home in his bed because that's what he wanted. Now, there are going to be other people saying, no, please put me in an institution and have nurses take care of me, whatever people's wishes are. But my son saw my dad die the way he wanted to die, on his terms. And, from a horrible disease, COPD. But he saw him, he got his favorite last meal, and he, the whole bit. And so I think you talk about it just all the way through. You talk about hospice, you talk about palliative care. And so my son knows what my wishes are. I have a trust. And I also have an advance directive, and he has copies of that. So he knows what to do. But we've had this conversation all along, so there's no surprises. And sometimes, we joke about it. On my last birthday, boy, Dad, I hope you make it to 64, and I just turned 63 in January. Come on. And, so we get to laugh about it too a little bit. But it's just a conversation that I think needs to happen on the regular with people. Yeah.
And I liked how you explained it. You kind of put, there are stages in life. You're alive, live life to your fullest. Fulfill the purpose you were created for. Follow your beliefs, follow guidelines. But then also be ready, because the time will come. Also be ready, because unfortunately there is a time that we will no longer be on earth. And, what is a great way of putting is, I see it also as a way of legacy. When we're alive, we're here to kind of represent ourselves.
Yes.
But once we passed away, we're living a legacy to those that are still alive. So, continuing that legacy, how can I be a blessing on those that will be around me, not only by taking care of, what happens when I die, but also what happens with what I currently have.
Right. Yeah. You said it very, very well. We want to live our life right now so that people will look at us and say, man, I want to be like that.
Yeah.
Right. I want to, I do a lot of funerals. Pastors do a lot of funerals, weddings, baptisms. I prefer weddings and baptisms, but I do a lot of funerals. And it's just so amazing how wonderful people are when they're spoken of at a funeral.
Yes.
I actually want to live my life that way, so that when people are saying it, it's the truth. I live a life that honors God, honors my family, honors my church. And then, we're all going to make our mistakes, right? But then to not just be focused on what happens when we're alive. After I'm gone, right? People. Well, I'm going to turn a corner here, but it's going to come back around. Okay. I have a lot of church members, talking about the second coming. Oh, yeah. Do you think Jesus will come back in the next 5 years? Do you think he's going to come back in the next year? I mean, how can this world last? And I've heard that all of my life.
Yes.
And I tell every one of them, I'm not planning on Jesus coming back while I'm still alive. And I know pastors aren't supposed to say that, but I'm going to say it. I plan on living my life here until I die, and I'm just going to make sure that every single day, if Jesus comes back on that particular day, I'm ready. Or if my life gets cut short on that particular day, I'm ready. And that means I'm ready spiritually, and I'm ready mentally. I'm not holding on to things so tightly that I can't die with dignity, right? That I have to trust God that everything's going to be okay, and that I'm treating my family, my neighbors, and my church really, really well while I'm alive, so that if today's my last day, I can die without any regrets. I can die knowing that I've done my best, with mistakes, plenty of mistakes, but I've done my best to bless my family, bless my church, bless my community. And that's one way to prepare for death, by living a really, really good life, right? Yeah. And then the other part of the legacy is, I really believe in the local church. I know that we have conferences and unions. I really, really, really believe in the local church. And so in my will, in my trust, I should say, there is something that I leave to my local church, because I want to make sure that they realize that I love them. I'm going to leave something for my family and for my local church and specific people and things like that. But I've done all that planning ahead of time. Now, the nice thing about what I have is a revocable trust is that I can change it as my life changes, right? So what if I had another kid? I'm not going to have another kid. But, maybe I would want to include their name in there. What if I start pastoring another church? Well, I'll probably switch it over to that other local church, those kinds of things. But it's funny, while I'm alive, I'm thinking about what happens after I'm not alive, when I'm making those adjustments and having those discussions with my family, with my friends, with my church, and things like that. My executor of my trust, they know everything that I have in my trust. They have a copy of it and a sealed copy of it. And they'll open it up at the right time and take care of business for me. And I again, it's just the least I can do for my family and for my church and my community.
Yeah, that's very important, what you just said about taking care of those that are around you.
Yeah.
And also, I liked that you kind of gave me an idea of substituting the word fear equating death, rather death an opportunity of love.
Yeah.
And I think that the more we think about that, the more we're going to relate to death as just a stage in life, like any other.
You're making me think of the Lion King, the circle of life,
yes,
right?
Yeah.
And that's what it is. Every single human being, except for maybe one in the Bible, right? Every single human being that's ever lived died. Billions and billions and billions of people haven't been able to escape it. Yeah. And so in my theology, Jesus takes all the fear out of death. That I don't have to fear it. I don't have to look over my shoulder. I can actually embrace it, because what happens at death? My spirit, the Bible says, goes back to God. My spirit is, and that can be interpreted a lot of different ways. A lot of people say your breath goes back to God. For me, everything about me, my essence, my character, my memories, everything that I treasure and value gets wrapped up at death, and it sits with God until he breathes all of that back into my new body, and I get to be me again. There's really no fear in that. And the other part about death that is, can I say death is appealing to me, is I've been under anesthesia 4 or 5 times in my life for procedures that I've had. Man, when I wake up, I don't know what happened to me, but it sure felt good to be sleeping that
kind of a
deep.
restart.
And at my age, there is nothing better than a good nap. And so, if I can lay on my deathbed, and if I'm fortunate enough to have family and friends around me, and realize that I'm good with God and I'm good with my family, I don't have to worry about what's going to happen afterward, because I've taken care of it all ahead of time. I've planned ahead of time, like the Bible says we ought to do, taking care of our family. If I can get to that stage and then just breathe my last breath, what a precious thing. It's in the book of Isaiah, but it might be in one of the Psalms, but I think it's in the book of Isaiah. It says, precious in the eyes of the Lord is the death of his saints. To just have that embrace and to wait for that trumpet call, I feel, and the only way I'm going to feel good about it is if I've done my work ahead of time.
Yeah.
The other part that I think is really important is for those of us who are people of faith, to realize that we are never going to do enough to earn heaven. It's an impossibility. Yes. I mean, seriously, I could triple my tithe. I could just spend all day witnessing or praying or doing whatever, and it won't bring me 1 inch closer to heaven than I already am. Yeah. When we realize that it's God's grace, his smile upon our life, that gives us the afterlife, that gives us eternity, and nothing that we do. When we realize that if we want to be there with him, he wants to be there with us. And that's just it right there. When we realize that, we can just stop the struggle.
It can bring some peace to our hearts.
So, probably talking too much, but when I was a young pastor, I had this family in the hospital. And I went and visited them, and they were going to be okay. And I'm walking out of the hospital room, and a nurse grabs me and says, "Are you a pastor?" And I said, "I am." And she said, "Can you go visit Louise?" I said, "Who's Louise?" "She's this patient in this room right down here." And the nurse said, "She refuses to die." And I'm like, "Okay, refuses to die." And she goes, "Yeah, but be careful when you go in there. She's a real rough one." I said, "Okay." I'm in my 20s. I don't know what I'm doing. I walk into this room, and this lady looks at me, and she goes, "Who are you?" I said, "Oh, I'm a pastor. My name is Mark." And she goes, "A pastor? Who sent you in here?" I said, "The nurse thought maybe you could use a visit." And she goes, "Well, I don't want to talk to you." Well, that's usually my invitation to walk a little closer. So
tell me more about your story.
I said, "I'm going to pull up a chair, Louise." And I sat down and pulled up a chair, and the discussion started. She was really, really angry and really, really tense. I mean, she was a waif. She was barely a person. She was so thin and emaciated from whatever ravaged her body. And I could tell she was really, really angry and in angst. And I said, are you afraid to die? And she goes, "Well, of course I am." I said, "Well, why are you afraid to die?" And then she started to cry. And she said, "Because of my husband." And I looked around the room. Nobody was in the room. I said, "Oh, my goodness." I said, "Louise, if you want your husband to be here, I'll run and get him. Just give me your address. I'll bring him here." And she said, "No, you idiot. My husband's dead." And I said, "Your husband's dead?" And she said, "And he's in hell right now. And I'm a Christian, so I'm going to be in heaven, and I'm going to have to live eternity without my husband."
Oh, my.
Oh, I said, "Louise, I'm so sorry." I said, "Louise, do you mind if I open up a Bible with you for a minute?" And she said, "Well, I guess so." And so I opened up a Bible, and I just talked about death and sleep and grace and the beauty of God's character and who he wants in heaven, and which is everybody, and the people who are not in heaven, or the people that just say, "I don't want to go." And I said, "Do you think if your husband knew about heaven, he'd want to be there?" And, "Oh, yeah, of course he would. Yeah." I said, "Louise, after this Bible study, maybe do you have some hope that you can be there with him?" And she started crying a different kind of tears. And she said, "Oh, Pastor," and she said these words, "God is way better than I thought he was." Got a call an hour or two later from the nurse. "Hey, Louise passed away. What did you do?" See, Louise wasn't prepared to die. She hadn't taken that time to think through God's grace, God's goodness, God's love. And once she realized it all, she was able to and slide into a beautiful, beautiful sleep and hopefully meet her husband again someday.
Oh, wow. And, if we follow that thought, that is a way of God giving us rest.
Yeah.
Giving us rest so we can be transformed.
Yeah.
And, there is hope after that.
The ultimate Shabbat.
Exactly.
The ultimate Sabbath.
The ultimate Sabbath where we endlessly will worship God and, come into that closeness with Him. And we all have that hope, that Jesus will come back for a second time and we will be able to live with Him eternally. So it was great having this conversation with you. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Personally, I enjoyed seeing death as a stage in life, and embracing it.
Yeah.
And I hope that our listeners can have this conversation with their families, with their loved ones.
Now, listen, let's fight to live.
Yeah, correct.
Okay. I mean, if you have a chance to live, live.
Yeah.
But yeah, when it's our time, to die with dignity and with a smile on our face. I think if we can do that, let's do that too.
Yeah.
Talking about death is something that maybe makes people feel
anxious.
Maybe they've been having questions about it in their mind. And one of the things I deal with in hospital are people who don't want to live anymore and maybe have tried to take their own life and tragically have given up on the gift of life that God has given them. And so some of what I do is to talk to them and have them start to realize all the things they have to live for. And I got to say, if anybody who's listening to this is having any thoughts of getting to death faster than God intended for them to do, of committing suicide, there is a number on the screen right now that you ought to call. And then I think there's a 3-digit number. Is it
988?
988, yeah, 988. If you're having those thoughts, let's not end it before it's our time.
Yeah.
But yeah, if you're struggling with that, call these numbers. And we want you to live, and we want to live great lives. And then when it's your time, we want you to die with a smile on your face.
Amen. Yeah. Amen. Thank you so much. And as we reflect on this episode, let's make amends with our lives. Let's live life to our fullest. Yeah. Let's live with a purpose.
Forgive. Don't hold grudges.
And let go.
Yeah, and live at peace with each other and with God, and let life happen like it's supposed to happen.
Yeah. So thank you very much for joining us for this podcast. Yeah. We're going to be airing this podcast very soon.
Okay.
So please stay in touch, and we'll see you in our next episode.